It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You go to emailrevealer.com, you get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can also check out other stuff. We have asset searches and background checks, locates, all kinds of stuff like that. You can also get the book, too, by the way, on Amazon.com. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. Also, too, please check out OppermanReport.com. I know I bring it up every show, but we have that special member section where you can sign up. You can become a member. It helps support the free shows on Friday night and on Saturday night. But also, too, you get exclusive content in that members section. And we got a lot of stuff coming up there. In fact, I just added the affidavits from the Jeffrey Epstein Donald Trump lawsuit. We had the complaint and the original lawsuit. In fact, we had both of them. We had one from Riverside that was last month, and we had the one that was recently filed in New York State. I just got my hands on the two affidavits, and you got to read them. Okay, it's very important because I know they're not available in a lot of places, and I may put them up for free someplace because it's important for people to read it. One thing that's very important about these affidavits is that the second witness, this Tiffany Doe, she claims that she was employed by Jeffrey Epstein in this affidavit. Now, no lawyer is going to put that affidavit in his complaint if he did not verify that information. So there's something to this lawsuit. I can promise you that. Okay, we got a big show today. It's a really heavy topic. And you know what? I had Joe Plummer booked last week, and we had a little scheduling time mix-up. And I was a sigh of relief, man, because to me, this is almost like a depressing topic. He wrote the book Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom, and Democracy. Also, too, you can find him at his website, Joe Plummer, Plummer, .com, or you can go to tragedyandhope.info to check out more about Joe and his books and stuff. Joe, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Your audio sounds so good, too. Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Joe Plummer? Not Joe the Plumber. Nobody wants to know about him. Joe Plummer.
I actually get that.
I know.
A lot of people think I am Joe the Plumber, and I get traffic every now and then. Whenever he hits the news, my website starts getting lots of traffic. So, it works out all right. They're looking for that other guy, and they get me instead. So I get to, pitch my info.
How cool is that?
Right. So, but anyway, I'm an author. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm probably more of a researcher than anything, at least for the past 13 years or so. Spent a lot of time researching and writing about corruption in our economic and political system, and written a few books on that particular topic. And my most recent, as you mentioned, is Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom, and Democracy. And in a nutshell, it's an introduction to the work of Carroll Quigley. And for those who aren't familiar with who Carroll Quigley is, he's a very prominent and respected historian who earned his PhD at Harvard and taught at Princeton and taught at Georgetown University and advised the Department of Defense. Bill Clinton's mentor. A lot of people get a kick out of that. And so this very prominent historian specialized really in researching and writing about the true nature of power, not the representative governments that we're taught about in high school, but the true nature of how the system actually operates. So that's the problem with his work is it's very academic and it's very dense. And his book, Tragedy and Hope, is 1,300 pages of small print, which is probably about 2,000 pages if you were to make it a normal-sized print book. So most people just can't access the information in that form. So that's the point of writing Tragedy and Hope 101, was to help people discover this narrative about what our so-called representative governments actually are, how they actually function, and that what they're led to believe in school is a myth.
Now, the original book, Tragedy and Hope, wasn't there some kind of like suppression on that too? Is that book available now?
Yeah, you can get it now, but absolutely. It was suppressed. I covered that in chapter 1 of the book, how Quigley realized, he was invited in. He was part of this elite intelligentsia of experts. He wasn't part of the power structure, but he was in agreement with this concept of letting people believe that there's representative government and letting them believe that there's democracy as they're taught in school, while in reality, behind the scenes, all the meaningful policies are set by these policy experts. In fact, he goes so far as to say that, it's clear in the 20th century that the expert will replace the democratic voter in control of the political system. And that was back in the 60s that he wrote that. And they had been working on this for a very long time. And so he was enough of a part of that network of individuals that he was actually invited in to see their secret papers and how they had established the power that they had and the way in which they operated, which was all, as a historian, it's perfect for him because this is what he does. He's writing the history, but they clearly didn't expect him to share the information that he discovered. So this is where there's some controversy. People, a lot of the earlier books that covered Quigley's work demonized him for being close to that power structure and for saying that he, for the most part, agrees with it. But I kind of see another angle there. I mean, I acknowledge that he was extremely arrogant, as all of these people are, and had very little respect for the common people and didn't believe really in the wisdom of the electorate and all of that. But at the same time, he was moral enough to see the dangers and the corruption and the problems with how these so-called experts were doing things. And after, it was his goal. He says right in the Anglo-American Establishment that what these people have achieved is terrifying and it needs to be known because it can't exist in this fashion. And that's when things started to go bad with him. And as you stated, his book was suppressed and he started to realize, okay, maybe these people are a little bit more nefarious than I originally thought.
Now, it does seem that they are nefarious, that they're cold-blooded, and they have a different view on the value of human life than the average person does. Now, is that bred into them through the bloodline? Is that taught to them in their schooling, in these boarding schools and stuff that they go through?
I don't know. I think it could just be an issue of they could just be truly psychotic, okay? Mm-hmm. They could be psychotic. Or it could be a combination of both. So clearly, the people who created this system that Quigley reveals in Tragedy and Hope in the Anglo-American Establishment are long dead. But successors would be chosen among the right type of people who clearly will be able to function within this political ideology of realpolitik, this concept where there is no moral dimension. Right and wrong are determined by results. It has nothing to do with morality. If what you did succeeds, it's right, and if what you did fails, then it was wrong. So this is something that clearly most of us can't understand. We're brought up to believe that right and wrong has to do with whether or not you're violating the rights of other people. It's based on some sort of moral consideration. This is completely and explicitly rejected by the practitioners of realpolitik. Everything is about power. Power is the only thing that matters. And so anything that expands your power and enables you to do what you have decided you want to do, which includes, of course, lying and cheating and manipulating and stealing and exploiting, then that's fine. And you could argue that the counter-argument to that morality is important and we're taught that truth is important and representative government is important and we're taught all these things, is part of the ruse to help them maintain their power, to have everybody else missing the intellectual framework to even understand the concept of these people and how they function, because it doesn't exist. In the average person's mind, that's just not how things are.
Quick question. Carroll Quigley, is he still alive today?
No.
Okay. Okay, he's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody carrying on his work, or any children or anything that speak on his behalf?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. The good ones tend to die real young.
Oh, how young was he when he died?
Well, he was in his 60s, but, you look at the Rockefellers and the Kissingers, the ones that are at the top of this pyramid and still running around in their 90s. It's a shame, and of course I believe Quigley was a heart attack, and then you start getting into the stories of the heart attack guns and the way they were taking people out with those things. I don't know if you saw I believe that was the Church Committee investigations.
Oh, sure.
The CIA, yeah. So, he not too long after, he was becoming a problem. And not too long after, he apparently was really starting to understand that the intelligentsia was being manipulated and used as well by this network of individuals who, in Quigley's words, had come together for the sole purpose of controlling all habitable portions of the world. And that the way that they were going to do that was through secret, that's the effective word, secret, economic and political influence, as well as control of educational and journalistic propaganda agencies. That was their whole thing. So he started to realize that maybe all these horrible things, now I'm speculating. Now, he never came out directly and said this, but it's clear by the direction he was moving in, and especially with the fact that he betrayed their trust by exposing, when he knew specifically, as a result of his interactions with them, that he wasn't supposed to do that. I mean, that's one of the primary tenets of, like, for instance, again, I'm mentioning the Anglo-American establishment because it focuses specifically on this network of individuals, whereas Tragedy and Hope covers a lot more information. His primary difference of opinion is that they wish to remain unknown. So he knows that they don't want other people to know that they exist or know how much of an influence they've had on world events. And he's saying this is one of the most powerful facts of the 20th century. So that's a pretty heavy statement from a guy who's a well-respected, established historian with 30 years teaching at Georgetown University to say, you want to look at the history of the 20th century. These are the people who are driving these major wars, World War I, World War II, and everything in between. This is the rise of Hitler. All of this stuff, these people were behind. It's a pretty heavy statement.
Yeah, and like you mentioned a bit earlier, this guy was a professor of Bill Clinton, and Clinton actually mentioned him in his inauguration speech?
You know what? He definitely mentioned him. Whether it was the inauguration speech or not, I can't be sure. But yeah, he name-dropped Quigley. Okay.
Now, okay, yeah. Now, we were talking earlier about how these soulless type characters at the top, they have this ability to act without sympathy or empathy for others in this really soulless way, Did you come across anything? There seems to be a pattern of pedophilia you hear about, with the Prince Andrew and Jimmy Savile, and, and all that kind of stuff. Pedophilia and Satanism. Did you run across anything like that?
Well, the book is really about Quigley's work, so he doesn't get into that. So I didn't, I'm not adding any of that. I have read some things about it. I obviously read the Franklin cover-up, a long time ago, and I've read other things, but it's not something I've looked heavily into. But it wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't say there's nothing. Again, it's an issue if people have the desire to have sex with children and they are of this particular mindset, why wouldn't they?
Right. But there also seems to be the blackmail element, too, in all that.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, you put people in power who have those weaknesses or those faults or whatever it is, and then that's how you keep them under control, absolutely, yeah.
Now, I don't want to offend anybody, okay, so I'm apologizing in advance, but you always hear these theories of, the rulers of the world, and it almost inevitably goes back to the Jewish. To be polite, they'll say Zionist now, but that anything along those lines.
Yeah, he doesn't really get into that much. He does mention the Rothschilds, and obviously the Rothschilds are part of the most powerful instrument in all of this, which is the banking instrument, the Federal Reserve System, and all the central banks and the Bank of International Settlements. This system of debt money that was created specifically, in Quigley's own words, to dominate the states of the world, to dominate the governments of the world. So he gets into it in that regard, but as far as saying it's a Jewish conspiracy or anything like that, he doesn't really say a whole lot about that, and neither do I, because I think it's kind of a distraction. For me, I understand that some people are very, very passionate about that, but clearly it isn't all Jewish people. And so that's the first problem I have with stereotyping in general. If it was every single Jewish person that was involved in it, then that would be one thing. But the problem is these instruments are what the real problem is. They wouldn't be any better in the hands of Germans or the hands of Christians or the hands of Buddhists or Muslims or anybody. It's too much power for people to have, these things, these systems, and these instruments that these people have created. So there's that side of it. And then, of course, the other side of it is it's, in my view, it's wrong to demonize people for a characteristic that they couldn't change if they wanted to, really. If you're born in a place that makes you German, then you shouldn't be demonized for the atrocities of the Nazis, I don't think. And same thing with Jews or anything else. If it doesn't denote behavior, I guess, is basically what I'm trying to say. So yes, would I demonize Nazis? Yes, because the term Nazi, assuming they were serving Hitler's goals, which I think were not good, then that at least it's a label that denotes behavior. But to me, these other labels don't, and it's kind of a distraction for me.
Yeah, I agree, and it just seems to be that on both ends of it, it's just so passionate. There seems to be like some other motivating force to go down that road, rather than
talking about the demonization of particular religions and things.
Anti-Semitism in particular.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not my thing. Yeah. It's because it's just not accurate. I'm trying to be respectful myself. Honestly, when people write me and go on rants about Jews, I want to respond angrily, but I don't. I just understand that they're in a place where it's simpler for them to, again, just think that there's this total solution where we just go kill all these people and then everything will be all right. I think it's utterly insane and equally as immoral as what these other people are doing. And again, there's the obvious point, which it isn't. This system is made up of more than Jewish people, and if you took out every Jewish human being in the world, the system would still be there, and it would just be another group who controlled it, even if, assuming you accept that it is 100% orchestrated by this small segment of the larger segment of Jews that exists.
And it seems that the whole anti-Semitic motivation, it's part of the game, it's part of the manipulation, it's part of the distraction.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. It hurts. It doesn't help. This is what I would say to somebody. I would say, okay, fine, I get it. You think I'm supposed to say it's all about the Jews.
Yeah.
And because I don't, that makes me part of the problem. Well, I already know what your solution is. I assure you that's not going to go over too well, and it's not going to help at all, and you're only protecting. If it is in fact the Jews, you're only protecting the power structure by going out and screaming this, because most people intuitively realize the absurdity of what you're suggesting and how wrong it is. Whereas what I'm doing is attacking the instruments. I'm talking about these political structures and the banking system and all these things that they've created. If I'm able to raise awareness about those things and we reduce the power of those instruments or eliminate them altogether, guess what? Whoever is controlling it is going to suffer as a result of that. Whether it's the Jews, the Germans, the Buddhists, the Muslims, doesn't make any difference. We attack the instruments. That's what they need for their power. So in my view, what we're doing here by not going down that other route is actually going to be more effective in the long run.
It's a shame we had to spend so much time on it as we did.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But it's there,
You brought it up. I'll do my best to answer it.
I hear you, man. And I get the same thing, too, from both sides, because an old friend of mine is head of the Jewish Defense Organization, so he's on the other end. So I got all ends here. Now, the premise here is that the game is rigged and that they're running both sides of the game, the communists and the capitalists. What about religions? Are they also running the Bible and Muslim and Islam, and are they running that game too?
Well, it's like all of the power structures, they infiltrate the power structures of society. And so, yes, I would say to a degree, so for instance, with terrorism, where they're constantly creating terrorist threats, okay, they're doing that because it helps them expand their power. It expands the power of the state that they control. So Islam, especially the super scary terrorist Islam that they have been, just like they created the communist threat, they have switched over now to terrorism, which is a lot easier to manufacture and scare people with. And this goes all the way, you can go back as far as you want. You can go back to the overthrow of the government of Iran in 1953, where they were, using people who are out there committing what would be considered acts of terrorism to affect a political outcome. That's the whole purpose of terrorism. So terrorism is the great ally of these individuals. And, in Afghanistan, where they created the Mujahideen and used them, and, the threat of terrorism, the Islamic State, where the recently declassified State Department documents said the government knows damn well what's going to happen in Iraq as a result of these policies, but that's okay. That's what we want because it's going to destabilize the target, which is Assad in Syria. So it's one of those things where you got to be really careful about how the way you frame it, I suppose. Are they controlling Islam? No. Are they using fear that they tie to Islam? So again, this is something people need to understand. There are billions of Muslims in the world, okay? How many of them are responsible for the crimes that are used to terrify people into accepting the police state and accepting the erosion of our civil liberties and accepting the foreign policy that would otherwise be impossible to sell? What percentage are responsible for that? It's a tiny, tiny percentage. It's the same kind of thing with the Jews. It's the same. It's the same formula, where you're able to persuade all these people that because of the actions of a minority that you can or look at guns. Guns is another example. This is the great irony with these shootings. On one side, you have the people who are saying because they were Muslim, all Muslims are bad. And then, of course, you have the people who are labeled as liberals saying because a gun was used, all guns and gun owners are bad. Neither are right. If you're being accurate, you have to look at this and say, no, the people who commit the crimes are the people who are the criminals, and you cannot, if you're being fair or honest, demonize everybody. And even, I guess you could argue, okay, so people will go to, like, say, the Quran, and they'll pick out things that are violent. And they'll say, okay, but these people call themselves Muslims, and it says this in the Quran. And so I guess you could technically argue that the Quran is advocating violence, and because these people say they're Muslims, that means they too are advocating violence. But I don't think that is what the vast majority of Muslims are doing any more than the vast majority of Christians. If you go to the Bible, there's some really messed up stuff in the Bible. But I know a lot of good Christians. I'm not a Christian, but I know people who are Christians who are excellent people, who don't advocate violence, who don't advocate violating the rights of others, who certainly aren't into, murdering people. That's one of the things in Deuteronomy where it says, if somebody comes to you, and I'm talking about the Bible now, somebody comes to you and mentions another God other than me, whether it's, even if it's your mother or your wife or your sister or your brother, you must kill them immediately. All right, well, that's not something that would be considered acceptable, but the vast majority of Christians neither would, even though they call themselves Christians, they wouldn't support that, or believers in the Bible, I guess would be maybe a better term to use. I'm not, well-versed in religion, but, I know that the two books have some questionable things in it, but the vast majority of people who consider themselves adherents to those faiths wouldn't support those things.
Oh yeah, I'm a fundamentalist Christian. I'm a Bible believing Christian. But there's even stuff in here in the Old Testament. They talk about I think if your wife is raped, to chop her up in 8 pieces and spread the pieces of miles apart. Not that I would ever do that. Maybe after my divorce, shortly after my divorce, I might have done that. But obviously we wouldn't do this stuff today.
Right. So yeah, it's just I don't know. I'm just not a fan of stereotyping. All of the broad brush stuff really works to their advantage. Let me put it to you that way. It's the easiest way to divide and conquer, and that's something that they're masters of, and they use over and over and over again. They do it against countries. So again, think of the absurdity of that. Because the leadership of this particular country is disgusting, then we can demonize all of the people in that country, and they all become inhuman, and they should all be, destroyed. It's no different than, like, how would we feel? So let's say whoever you are, a lot of people are still in this left-right paradigm. So let's assume you're on the right paradigm, the right side of the paradigm. How would you like it if, when Bill Clinton was president, that all of the United States was demonized by another country because of the actions of the Clinton administration? Or if you're on the left, how would you like it if all of the United States was demonized and punished because of the Bush-Cheney administration? You wouldn't, because you were against that. You just didn't really have the power to do anything about what was going on. So it's just what it is. I haven't figured out how to deal with that yet. I think there are people who intuitively understand that you need to individually judge the actions of individual people and not broad brush. And then there are people who don't.
Okay, that's an interesting question, because how do you deal with this personally? Do you still vote?
No, I haven't voted. Well, here's the thing. If there was somebody put forward, like Ron Paul is somebody that I did vote for, and that was the only person, because I felt that he could, I felt that he really, truly was somebody who would not serve the establishment in any way. So people would say, well, what about Trump? Well, Trump is pro-torture, and I absolutely am against torture. And Trump says, hang Snowden because he's a traitor. Well, I don't understand how somebody would say, and I'm not trying to slam Trump. I'm not saying Hillary Clinton's any better. She's not. She's totally part of the establishment. But I can understand how he will be used. These authoritarian, anti-American, by the American standards, American principles, it will serve the establishment. They will allow those anti-American principles to expand under a presidency like that, and they will block anything that that they're not happy with. Same thing with Sanders. If Sanders would have gotten in, they would have just blocked all of his attempts at the reforms that the people wanted, but they would have let him do anything that expanded spending and expanded government, because ultimately that expands debt. It expands the power of the people who control the Federal Reserve System and keep the government afloat with all of this money that they create out of thin air. And that's how he would have served the system without meaning to. This is what they do. It's what they do. They put forward the people that they want you to choose from. So that's part of the scam. It's also part of something that I cover in the book, that most people never really think about how they meet their top-tier candidates. Well, they meet it through the instrument known as the media, the mainstream media, which these people have controlled forever, going all the way back to the print, before there was TV and radio. And so that's what happens. It's like, yes, you get to choose, but you get to choose from those who were chosen for you. And that's not a choice. In the unlikely event that somebody who's truly independent comes along, like let's say a Ron Paul, and he actually manages to overcome the demonization and the character assassination of him and his followers and all this other stuff. In the unlikely event that that happens, they just pull out all of these additional stops to prevent that person from getting into power. So like the good thing that happened with the Trump-Sanders thing is it revealed how the delegate system actually works. People realize, Sanders could actually beat Clinton, and it doesn't make any difference because the delegates get to vote for whoever they wanted. Now, it worked out well for the establishment because they didn't have to pull that card, but you better believe they would have if they had to.
Well, they actually did. Here in Nevada, we had more delegates. Bernie won Nevada.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, and they just, when we were at the county convention, they just shouted us down and then just slammed the gavel down and ran out of the room and called the cops in. Okay, it was really in your face. They were. I did a live show where they were arresting Bernie delegates on the because first they went after the credentials committee, and they were going to arrest the Bernie Sanders people on the credentials committee. That was way back in at the but that was before the county. That was first was the county, and then it was the state convention. But the county convention they tried to arrest the credentials committee. Then at the state they just banged the gavel down and ran out of the room.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine, though, like how much bigger of a deal. That's great that you got to see it.
Yeah.
You get to see how it really works. But you can imagine if it would have been on a national stage where Bernie had won and won and won and won and won, and he clearly had more delegates, and then the delegates just voted for Hillary anyway.
Yeah, but it could still happen.
Can you imagine? But they don't want to show their hand that way.
Well, you remember with Ron Paul, when he walked into the convention the first time, the whole place roared, man, you know? And they wouldn't even count his delegates. That was in your face, too.
But yeah, that's it kind of works to our advantage. It works to our advantage that people are learning, okay? It takes a while. They're starting to realize that the system is a scam. That's the whole point of this book. It's to point them in a direction where they have very reputable sources like Quigley and other very reputable people that are referenced in the work, and that shows irrefutably that it is a scam. You don't have to feel uncomfortable about believing it because it's the truth. It's a carefully managed con game, period. Okay? So if this book doesn't convince you of that, then I don't know if anything will. So that's kind of, that. There's that element of it, so people can be confident in their own knowing that, wow, we have been intentionally deceived. These are the people who did it. They intended to do that from the start. They've succeeded up to this point. And then you have this added advantage of, as more people are waking up and as more people are becoming frustrated with the corrupt system itself, they're going out and they're pushing back, and they have to show more of their hand, like they did with the delegate stuff and what they did to Ron Paul. It's waking all of these other people up. So, like, let's say people who were more left-leaning might not have cared much. If they fit in that, traditional paradigm of left-leaning, they might not have cared about what was going on with Ron Paul. But when they saw it happening to Bernie Sanders, and they are smart enough to realize what Hillary Clinton is, they're going to all of a sudden have an awakening that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Okay, we've already burned through a half hour, and I told you we could have done 2 hours, man. I knew it.
Well, we can go long if you want. We can go a little bit longer than an hour if you want. I don't like to hear myself talk too much, man. I talk a little bit and then I'm good. But yeah, whatever you want to do. If you got questions we need to get to, go ahead. Shoot. I'll try to short.
Let's take a commercial break. We're here with Joe Plummer. The book is Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom, and Democracy. And we've hardly even gotten into the book. Okay, we kind of jumped right over the book, and because I had so many questions for you from as soon as I started researching the book, I just had so many things I wanted to ask you.
That's all right, man.
Yeah, one of the websites is joeplummer.com, and not Joe the Plumber. It's Joe Plummer, Plummer, and tragedyandhope.info. If you go there, you'll get the link to joeplummer.com. So
yeah, and you get the book for free too, Ed. Just so everybody knows, you can read the book for free online at tragedyandhope.info. I probably should have said that at the start. So yeah, you don't have to buy it to read it.
Okay, great, very, very good. But it's on Amazon too, as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Some people still buy it; they want a copy, but there's no barrier to entry. This information is really, really important. I want people to have access to it. So yeah, if you go to tragedyandhope.info, it's there. You can read the whole thing.
Okay, excellent. We'll be right back with Joe Plummer right after these messages. This is your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. And if you're enjoying this show right now, there's more. You can get more. You can go to the Ed Opperman YouTube channel, and you could subscribe there. And we have archives of all of our past shows for over the past 3 years, about 200, 300 shows. You can also go to the Opperman Report Spreaker channel, and you could follow us there. Again, a ton of shows, about 300 shows on there. And whenever we do an impromptu show, an emergency type broadcast that we do during the week occasionally, you'll get an email notifying you of breaking news and spontaneous broadcasts that we may do during the week. You can also go to oppermanreport.com and become a member. If you become a member, you help support the free archives on Spreaker and YouTube, and you help support the free shows on Friday evening and on Saturday evening. Each of these shows, Friday evening and Saturday evening, are carried for free on 7 internet stations, okay? So you help support that, but also, too, at OppermanReport.com in the members section, we have exclusive content. Shows that are recorded during the week that are only available to members. So please check out OppermanReport.com and help support the show.
The son of a Polish immigrant who grew up in a Brooklyn tenement, Bernie Sanders. He went to public schools, then college, where the work of his life began, fighting injustice and inequality, speaking truth to power. Bernie moved to Vermont, won election and praise as one of America's best mayors. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families and for principle, opposing the Iraq War, supporting veterans. Now he's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system that holds up a rigged economy. Bernie's campaign is funded by over 1 million small contributions from people like you. He's fighting for living wages, equal pay, and tuition-free public colleges. Bernie Sanders.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders. Husband, father, grandfather, an honest leader, building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Check out strawmanmusic.com. Sean Duff is our webmaster here at the Opperman Report, and he's a very talented musician. He's part of a band called Strawman. They're based up there in Canada. Don't hold that against them. These are like-minded folks. If you like the shows you hear on the Opperman Report, you'll like the music that they have over at strawmanmusic.com.
Enough is enough. Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the 1930s. And then, after getting a huge taxpayer bailout because they were too big to fail, it turns out that 3 out of the 4 largest banks are bigger today than they were before we bailed them out. That's crazy. I'm Bernie Sanders. My plan: break up the big banks who are strangling our economy and make them pay their fair share of taxes. Then we can invest in the middle class, expand Social Security, and provide universal college education. I'll rein in Wall Street behavior so they can't crash our economy again. Will they like me? No. Will they begin to play by the rules if I'm president? You better believe it. I'm Bernie Sanders, Democratic candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
You know, you can get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, if you go to my website, emailrevealer.com. Now, this is a limited edition book, okay? And you can get a signed copy of this book, and it'll be personally autographed to you or whoever you want to give the book to as a gift. Once you have my signature on that book, you can copy the signature and put it on checks and pass them all over the world. Emailrevealer.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator.
He's fought injustice and inequality his whole life. Bernie Sanders. As a college student, he was arrested for challenging segregated housing. Bernie marched with Dr. King and thousands of others for civil rights. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families on health care and jobs. Now he's taking on Wall Street banks and a corrupt political system that keeps in place a rigged economy. Bernie Sanders, a reformer who believes in ending racial profiling and mass incarceration so the justice system works for everyone. Bernie Sanders.
There is no president who will fight harder to end institutional racism and reform our broken criminal justice system.
Bernie Sanders, an honest leader building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with Joe Plummer, not Joe the Plumber, Joe Plummer, and he's the author of Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom, and Democracy. Now, you can get that book at joeplummer, PLUMMER.com, or probably the best spot is tragedyandhope.info.
Yeah.
I almost did it.
Fair enough. You got tragedyandhope.info.
Right, almost did it. Okay. Now, you know what? We were going to do the interview last week. What really knocked the wind out of me that day was when I read the line in there. I think it was a quote from Quigley himself, where he said, "Vote out the rascals." Right? Yeah. And that's an expression I have used so many times. Way back when it was Obama versus who's that guy, Mitt Romney, and they're practically the same guy, same healthcare plan, the same thing, except for little foreign policy differences, but the same guy.
Yeah.
Maybe abortion difference,
Yeah.
And I would get people on here like Danny Sheehan and Cynthia McKinney and Cindy Sheehan, and I would say to them, well, what's your solution? What can we do? And they would go back to this old political thing. Well, we can still vote out the rascals, And now, but your theory is, okay, maybe if the vote doesn't get stolen, we can vote out the rascals. But even if we get our own rascal in there, it's hopeless.
That's straight from Quigley. Like you said, yes, you were reading a quote from Quigley where he, as a part of that upper echelon of experts who are going to run society without letting all the little people know, specifically says that the way the system is, and keep in mind we're going back into the 60s, that's how it's worse now, is the way it's supposed to be. Ideally, what you want are two parties that provide people the illusion of choice, but in reality, there shouldn't be any meaningful difference between the two primary candidates that end up being put forward for the people to choose from, because you don't want any disturbance in the policies that are important to the experts. You don't want that to be disturbed. So he uses the words specifically, so at any election, the electorate can throw the rascals out without leading to any profound shift in the policies established by the experts. So again, this is the concept. This is the real root of the argument here. The system is designed specifically to make you feel like you can affect change, but it is that's part of the scam. It's you're led to believe, and you continue to participate in it. But then through the act of participating in it, you feel like, oh, okay, well, at least I had some say. No, ideally you have no say. That is their goal. Now, again, I'll back Quigley up a little bit. He goes through what appears to be a conflict in his own mind. So he starts with that arrogant proposition and says it unapologetically. Of course that's the way it is, and that's the way it should be. But then later he starts to back away from that a little bit and starts to say, well, it would be nice if there was still some freedom for the average individual. Okay, so he starts to back away from it a little bit, and he's saying, it's kind of rough to accept this, that everybody's going to essentially, yes, they'll still be able to vote, but their freedoms and their choices are going to be limited within very narrow parameters by the experts, of course. So that's him backing away from a little bit and going, it would be kind of bad to lose this tradition of people actually having some say in their government. And then he goes, full circle. Like I said, by the time you get to some of the stuff in the Anglo-American establishment, it's which was published after his death, and I've read but haven't confirmed he wanted it that way. So that's where he takes off the gloves and he says, what these people have, what they've accomplished is terrifying and it's dangerous. So he does pretty much go full circle on that. But yeah, the bottom line being that, that's what the goal of the system is. The goal of the system is to mislead you. Period.
Oh boy, and do you get depressed about this?
I've gotten good at dealing with it. It is what it is, and I'm doing what I can to try to raise awareness, and I don't believe it can last forever. They themselves believe that the only way they can continue doing, the only way they could have done what they've done to this point, and the only way they can continue doing it is by remaining hidden and continuing to deceive people. So the solution, really, the most important thing is the easiest thing, which is for people to go out there and raise awareness. With that, that's the foundation of their power. According to Quigley, again, they're going to control all habitable portions of the world. How? By secret economic and political influence, secret being the operative word, and secret control of journalistic, educational, and propaganda agencies. That is primary. That's the foundation of the power. They have to manipulate people, and they have to hide behind things. I cover the Meiji Restoration in Japan. It's the exact same concept, where this oligarchy operated behind the emperor. The emperor supposedly comes back to power, and the Shinto ideology, the people are indoctrinated in the Shinto ideology, which calls for abject submission to the emperor, which is, the representative of God here on earth, because this oligarchy could not have done that without that myth. Do you understand? They couldn't have done the things that they did acting on their own out in the front, so they act behind this myth. They put forward the idea that the emperor is in control, and all of these policies are emanating from the emperor, but they're not. They're emanating from the people who are behind the scenes, and that's the way they needed it to be. It's the exact same blueprint. It's just different. It's a different ideology. It's a different system of myths that are perpetuated and enables this oligarchy, unelected, unaccountable, to do what they do. It's the same thing.
Okay, now this is my notes in the next question I had for you.
Yeah.
Because now your proposal is that, okay, this is an illusion. Democracy is an illusion. The game's rigged, right?
Yep.
Just to make us feel good that, hey, we're voting for the cow that's going to the side of the slaughterhouse and the other side of the slaughterhouse, right? Or the sheep. But then you come back with this thing about, okay, now we're in the information age and people are waking up. And that's going to be is it possible, do you think, that that's an illusion as well, and that's part of their game? Because I don't see that working out at all. Okay, there's people waking up. You got all these people running around saying they're awake, because I'm on all these stations, awake this and awake that, and half of them still think Obama's a communist, and half of them still think that Trump is an outsider and he's going to go in there. You know what I mean?
It's half. So we're making progress.
Oh, man, you're an optimist, my friend.
Well, no, it's true. Yeah. The bottom line is more people are aware of how backward and corrupt the system is today than they ever were.
True.
So to me, we're in way better shape right now than we were in, say, 100 years ago, 1913. Okay? Trust in the government and the proclamations. I mean, you read some of the stuff from back then. Oh boy, were they arrogant at that point. That was when they were first establishing this system, and they were just over the top arrogant with the way they spoke of the electorate and how easily manipulated these people are, and how they were going to establish their society of experts. Bertrand Russell discusses the society of experts, and he goes further. Russell discusses that this society of experts, not only, of course, they're going to manipulate the electorate, but they're also going to manipulate the politicians. The true power is going to reside in these people, in this network of individuals who understand the scientific principles of human manipulation, of social manipulation. So even ideally, the experts will convince the politicians that they're in control of the forms, but using the tactics that they've established, they will be able to control everything and direct the policies as they see fit. So I think we've come a long way. I understand why people can get pessimistic. We're impatient and we want everything to happen now. But I think that there are a lot more people awake. I know that there are a lot more people awake now than there were just about 13 years ago when I pretty much really started digging into this stuff. There's a huge awakening in a very short period of time. So I personally, I'm optimistic. I think it's inevitable that at least the system as it exists now will be unsustainable. You could use Brexit as an example.
I was going to get to that, and let's get to that after this next question.
Sure. Go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, because now too, these people that are awake also a lot of them seem to be falling into this again, the whole Second Amendment thing, they're taking our guns, the FEMA camps, the martial law, the UN trucks. They're also falling into all of that stuff.
But what do you mean by falling into it? They do definitely want to disarm people. Now, whether or not they're going to be able to do it is another issue. But clearly, if you want to rule all habitable portions of the world, you don't want the electorate to have the power to wake up en masse and resist. And to just kind of imagine what that might look like, it's kind of sad commentary on society today that millions of people show up when a sports team wins. Okay? Look at the crowds that showed up in Cleveland because the Cleveland Cavaliers won, or you can look anywhere and see this just massive throng of people that come out. They're coming out because they're celebrating. That's fine. But you can imagine that same mass of people coming out because they're really tired of what's going on and they realize the extent of the criminality of the government. So this is kind of thing that we're speaking dispassionately about it, but some of the things I cover in the book are probably going to make your blood boil, and they should. So imagine that same number of people coming together and not asking for representation, but actually coming forward with the intent to change things. That happens periodically throughout history. It's how we came about, right? How the United States was born. So what you don't want is those people. It's bad enough that there's that many people doing it, but if they're armed, it just makes it that much more difficult to suppress that. So the Second Amendment thing is I'm a believer in the concept that the Second Amendment was more about protecting individuals from tyrannical government than it was about hunting, or that it was even about protecting their personal property against common criminals. Because, we fought a tyrannical government. That's how we won our independence. So, I'm willing to discuss with you if you've got a difference of opinion on that. But from the perspective of, if I want power, if I want to rule people, of course I want to disarm them. And that's just, the problem is it's so heavily ingrained in our society that's going to be really difficult to do. But they're continually, absolutely, if they could snap their fingers and say, and do like what they did in Australia or in other nations, of course they would want to do that. Because if you're going to be the sole power that's controlling all nations, you want to be the one who has the weapons. Quigley covers that too. See, so this is a good point. I'm kind of glad you brought this up, and I'm going to try to cut it short. Okay. But Quigley himself, who would be considered of the leftist character, having studied history, specifically talks about, and I've got this in the bonus material for the book where you can read it, that whenever the citizens are armed, that's when there tends to be more representation. Whenever they're armed comparable to the rulers, there tends to be more representation. And at every point where the rulers gain superiority over the citizens in that regard, and which includes disarming them, that's when tyranny comes into play. So that's not something you would expect to hear from a left-leaning Ivy League professor, but he's a historian. So he's studied history and he sees what happens. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know your politics on that, and I try to be respectful to people in their politics. I don't get into this. Oh, you're these stupid words, libtards and republic this and all that crap. I just don't get into it because it's useless. It's not helpful. But at the same time, I have my own position on these things based on my study of these people and how they operate. So. Okay. If you were to, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm all for armed revolution. Okay, I'm a supporter of the Castro revolution, Che Guevara. I'm armed resistance and all for it. Okay, but a couple of things. Now, you said that I'm a leftist. I look at Castro with a suspicious eye. What do you call?
You said you are or you aren't.
I am. I'm a extreme leftist. Okay. And now the thing is socialist. But now the thing is, you said, well, if they could snap their fingers and put an end to all these weapons. But they can, because the arms manufacturers, they're all part of the 1%. They're all at the same clubs. And they could just do a press conference and say, you know what, after Sandy Hook, we're so depressed and our conscience has stopped us, and we want to stop manufacturing guns. We've decided to stop. You know?
I know, Ed, but we've got hundreds and hundreds of millions of guns, so it would be hard for them to come take them all, don't you think?
Yeah, right. Well, no matter what, they're never going to, but they're still manufacturing. No matter what, they're never going to stop. They're never going to be able to get all the guns off the black market. Because whenever there's an insurrection, these guns appear, CIA, KGB drops them off, So, but there's that,
Well, but I'm just saying, like, for instance, when I'm talking about disarming people, I'm not necessarily talking about the manufacturing and stuff like that. They have to change the political climate to get what they want. That's how they use terrorism, to create a pretext to get people to accept the policies. Because, the bottom line is they're not all powerful. That's why they have to do everything in secret. That's why they have to do everything in a manipulative fashion. That's why they have to mislead people. That's, because it is a small group of individuals dictating policy against a mass of people. Again, think of the big millions of people in the street. It's hard to control that. So they have to do everything psychologically. It's all psychological warfare. So to the extent that they keep demonizing guns, that is an attempt to change the public perception of the value of guns. So it's interesting that you call yourself an extreme leftist, but you're pro-Second Amendment. So that's an interesting combination.
Well, just like the Black Panthers. Black Panthers, want guns. I want guns too.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. So it's just, let me put it to you this way.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you're against, if you had a choice for the people who were perpetuating those crimes, I assume that you view them as crimes, if you had a choice between those people having weapons or not having weapons, you would want them to not have weapons. So the difference here is only that these people are the criminals and they want absolute power because that's the only thing they understand and it's the only thing that, in their view, matters. So clearly, anything they can do to help demonize the concept of the individual having the power to have weapons works to their advantage. That's about the best short summary I could come up with. Now, whether or not they're going to be able to take all the guns, I'm not particularly worried about it. I'm definitely not caught up in that. And the point you made about people claiming to be awake, but then they're out there cheering for Trump, I don't understand it. Yeah. I don't. But not everybody is. But I just, all I can do is explain why I'm not.
One more question for you, because the theory is, okay, they do these false flag operations in order to hype up the people to be against guns and want to turn all their guns in new gun legislation. But in reality, what happens every time there's one of these events, people are running out there buying 10 times more guns. I believe the 1% likes to sell guns. They're in the gun selling business. Arms dealing is one of the biggest things they do. And also, too, stop and think. What do they do? They cause chaos over in the Middle East. They got everybody shooting at each other over there. Maybe that's what they want here, too. Maybe.
You're talking about fomenting civil war here?
Well, they definitely want... Gun sales go up when these events happen. And we have 24-hour news coverage about a shooting in Orlando. We could go into the whole theory about what's behind it, and some odd stuff there. But guy's father's obviously CIA down in Orlando. You can't beat that, But gun sales go up, not down.
Yeah.
So if it's a plan of gun suppression, it doesn't seem to be working.
Well, again, we're talking about two different things, though. Okay. You're talking about how many guns that are winding up being sold versus whether or not you have the legal right to have that gun. So you have to go to a country like Australia that used mass shootings and rammed through legislation that enabled them to then go confiscate everybody's guns.
Right.
So there's two things there. I'm not in, just for the point of being clear here, I'm not in that argument. I'm not in that argument that that we're at this point facing a risk, because I don't think it is politically feasible at this point. But I could definitely see the idea of what they're doing is laying the foundation to demonize this concept, or especially to demonize the concept of people owning weapons like the NAR-15, which is essentially just a .223 rifle. They're trying to start that, because that would be the slippery slope. Okay, well, we can confiscate this because nobody needs that. Okay, well, then all you need is to have some people killed by some other type of weapon. Okay, well, we confiscate that because they don't need that. I can understand the logic of that, but it's definitely not anything that I've studied too closely, because right now there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of guns in this country, and I think there are enough people who would not succumb to the political pressure of being demonized as dangerous and all this other stuff. They try to paint all gun owners as reckless and uncaring, and they don't care about the dead and all this other crap. I just don't think it's working. So I'm not too scared of that.
One more point I'd like you to consider is, I think that this whole gun debate's another one of these trigger events, you know? But there was this idea of, these background checks. I'm in the background check business, you know? And it's never going to be the ultimate background check that you're going to find a damn thing out about anybody, especially when you start into mental health stuff. But the idea of, these are law-abiding citizens who have these guns. In my opinion, who gives a damn if law-abiding citizens have guns? If they outlaw guns, the right people who are going to be willing to use those guns to resist the government are going to keep their guns and have their guns and have them on the black market. Those are the people we need to have guns. The idea of these law-abiding citizens having guns, these people are the ones that are least likely to use their guns to resist the government or to resist any kind of oppression. So the whole idea of whether they outlawed guns or not, what difference does it make? The people willing to use them are going to keep their guns or stash guns or buy guns on the black market.
Yeah, well, I kind of understand what you're saying. It doesn't make any difference. It's not going to prevent people from having them, but it does give the government the ability to go after and punish people. So depending on how it goes. So again, now you're in the camp that says there will be an armed revolution if they try to do it. That's optimistic.
I'm not saying I don't think that. I don't think there is. I think the law-abiding people would give up their guns. And the smart
and then
guys
people like you and me would
stash
our guns and keep them somewhere. But would we then go to war with the government? Would that be the line that was drawn in the sand? Would it be time now, because they have made it illegal and made us criminals, not because we've actually violated anybody's rights, but just through legislation, they've made it illegal for us to exist in our current form with weapons. Would we then organize against the government and go overthrow it and restore that right? I don't know. It could be that would be tough. And all of the people who turned in their guns and cooperated, and all of the people who supported it, would clearly back the criminals who control this system. So I don't know, man. That would be rough. I'd rather it not happen. Let's put it that way. I would rather, if we can prevent them if we can continue making it very difficult for them to manipulate people. And that's another thing where the internet is excellent, because every time they try to manipulate people and lie about the type of the gun and this and the that and the crime, and there's always a rebuttal that undermines the arguments. And that wouldn't have been the case literally just 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it would have come across on the TV, and it would have been that would have been the only part of the argument that was given, and that would have been the only part that people heard. Now, people can get the statistics and find out where they're lying and where they're manipulating. So that's useful.
That point is so true, because 20 years ago, or even 40 years ago, I'm 53 years old, and when I was a kid, 17, 18 years old, I was an anarchist on the Lower East Side of Manhattan with the yippies and stuff. And when we wanted to get this information out, we did our own hand-printed newspaper, first of all, which got to maybe nobody. But we would actually make up posters and flyers and go out in the middle of the night with the paste, and paste them up on the walls to get this information out. So it's a whole different world, that's for sure. Let's take a commercial break again, okay, because we went over time. We got Joe Plummer, Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom, and Democracy. You could find him at joeplummer.com. That's Plummer. And also tragedyandhope.info. We'll be right back after these messages with more of a lively conversation with Joe Plummer. Okay, we'll be right back after this. Okay. This is your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. And if you're enjoying this show right now, there's more. You can get more. You can go to the Ed Opperman YouTube channel, and you could subscribe there. And we have archives of all of our past shows for over the past 3 years, about 200, 300 shows. You can also go to the Opperman Report Spreaker channel, and you could follow us there. Again, a ton of shows, about 300 shows on there. And whenever we do an impromptu show, an emergency type broadcast that we do during the week occasionally, you'll get an email notifying you of breaking news and spontaneous broadcasts that we may do during the week. You can also go to oppermanreport.com and become a member. If you become a member, you help support the free archives on Spreaker and YouTube, and you help support the free shows on Friday evening and on Saturday evening. Each of these shows, Friday evening and Saturday evening, are carried for free on 7 internet stations, okay? So you help support that, but also, too, at OppermanReport.com in the members section, we have exclusive content. Shows that are recorded during the week that are only available to members. So please check out OppermanReport.com and help support the show.
The son of a Polish immigrant who grew up in a Brooklyn tenement, Bernie Sanders. He went to public schools, then college, where the work of his life began, fighting injustice and inequality, speaking truth to power. Bernie moved to Vermont, won election and praise as one of America's best mayors. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families and for principle, opposing the Iraq War, supporting veterans. Now he's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system that holds up a rigged economy. Bernie's campaign is funded by over 1 million small contributions from people like you. He's fighting for living wages, equal pay, and tuition-free public colleges. Bernie Sanders.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders. Husband, father, grandfather. An honest leader. Building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Check out strawmanmusic.com. Sean Duff is our webmaster here at the Opperman Report, and he's a very talented musician. He's part of a band called Strawman. They're based up there in Canada. Don't hold that against them. These are like-minded folks. If you like the shows you hear on the Opperman Report, you'll like the music that they have over at strawmanmusic.com.
Enough is enough. Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the 1930s. And then, after getting a huge taxpayer bailout because they were too big to fail, it turns out that 3 out of the 4 largest banks are bigger today than they were before we bailed them out. That's crazy. I'm Bernie Sanders. My plan: break up the big banks who are strangling our economy and make them pay their fair share of taxes. Then we can invest in the middle class, expand Social Security, and provide universal college education. I'll rein in Wall Street behavior so they can't crash our economy again. Will they like me? No. Will they begin to play by the rules if I'm president? You better believe it. I'm Bernie Sanders, Democratic candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
You know, you can get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, if you go to my website, emailrevealer.com. Now, this is a limited edition book, okay? And you can get a signed copy of this book, and it'll be personally autographed to you or whoever you want to give the book to as a gift. Once you have my signature on that book, you can copy the signature and put it on checks and pass them all over the world. Emailrevealer.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator.
He's fought injustice and inequality his whole life. Bernie Sanders. As a college student, he was arrested for challenging segregated housing. Bernie marched with Dr. King and thousands of others for civil rights. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families on health care and jobs. Now he's taking on Wall Street banks and a corrupt political system that keeps in place a rigged economy. Bernie Sanders, a reformer who believes in ending racial profiling and mass incarceration so the justice system works for everyone. Bernie Sanders.
There is no president who will fight harder to end institutional racism and reform our broken criminal justice system.
Bernie Sanders, an honest leader building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We are here with Joe Plummer, Plummer, Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom, and Democracy. You can get him at tragedyandhope.info.com, and also joeplummer.com with 2 M's, Plummer. Oh boy, we're hitting all the hot topics, huh, man?
Ed, you told me to correct you. It was tragedyandhope.info.
Damn.
.com, but that's all right. So tragedyandhope.info.
You know, it's funny too because I wrote the info part in huge, like 3-inch letters over here. Well, you know,
it's hardwired in there. .com is part of it. So yeah, but no, tragedyandhope.info. It'll take them straight to the book, and they can read it immediately.
Okay, you know what? Let's move on from the guns. Okay. You know, so we covered the Jews, the guns. What else we want to say? We did a little bit of religion, right? But we've hardly gotten to the book. And what I would like to do is, because I think we've ignored the book a bit too much, is have you come back one day for maybe a half hour and an hour and just focus just on the book, just like it was a total different show, like we never even met each other.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, I'm not the least bit concerned about it, just so you know. I mean, people, the best part about this is if they're interested, you know, we've covered enough about it to hopefully pique people's interest. It's not, and I'd be happy to come back too, but I'm just saying, I don't come on these shows just to plug the book or whatever. I'm happy to talk with people and share ideas, and of course I want people to be aware of the information. That's the point of putting it together. But hopefully, I think most people who are interested in this topic, especially if they've heard this term New World Order and they think it's just crazy conspiracy theory and only, whack jobs talk about it, this provides them an opportunity to go to the most reputable sources out there, in my view, some of the most reputable, unimpeachable sources there are, men like Quigley and others, and verify it for themselves. So, yeah, if they don't, like I said, there's no barrier to entry. If they can type in tragedyandhope.info, they can immediately start reading it and draw their own conclusions. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about that.
Okay, but it moved me so much when I was reading about the book. You know, like I said, it really affected me that day, and even a couple of days after that. Because I'm all hyped up trying to get Bernie in there and stuff. And
right.
Anyway, and another thing too, it's just on the back of my mind, I can tell you. Okay, because we just traveled with the whole Bernie campaign. I was on the press bus all over from Cloverdale, California, down to Sacramento to San Francisco, just like 2 weeks ago. And I could tell you, man, the top level, especially back in November. No, not November. I mean in February here in Nevada when they were having the caucus here in Nevada. The highest level of the Bernie campaign thought that they thought they won Nevada, okay, and they don't subscribe to this theory that they do subscribe to that's a dirty system but you can trudge your way through it, and that if we have enough people involved we can overturn it. That's what they think. They don't subscribe to this thing that it's all rigged. Well, he says it's rigged, but they're convinced that he could have gotten in and that it was stolen by Hillary.
Well, it was stolen by the establishment that supports Hillary.
Right.
And the point being, again, even if he would have had more delegates, wasn't it Dean who came specifically out and said, I don't represent anybody. I represent myself, and I'm going to vote for who I think I should vote for. Wasn't that, did Howard Dean say that?
Yeah, the super delegate. A lot of them said that. Yeah.
Right. So it was in your face, you know. People go out and do what you want, but at the end of the day, the delegates are going to determine who is who the party's representative is going to be. So I guess maybe if it would have went that far, then those people who are still unconvinced might have been convinced at that point. You think they would have at least seen that? Okay, well, Bernie had more delegates, and he should have definitely been the nominee, and yet these votes were ignored. The will of the people went completely ignored, and they chose Hillary. I can't imagine anybody if it would have gone that far that they would have been able to continue ignoring it. But who knows? I mean, people have bias filters. They have these bias filters that make it hard for them to look at stuff, and they intentionally don't look at things that undermine what they believe.
But now, what about Trump? Because he overtook the party system. Obviously, the party's not behind him, and he was able to get in there just on popular vote.
Yeah, Trump is an interesting thing. Like I said, I think there's enough of, first of all, we have to see if he manages to pull it off. This kind of, if I have to say anything, it really plays into what I was talking about with what happened with Ron Paul,
right.
Where people are waking up and they're realizing that the system is corrupt and they're tired of all of it, and Trump managed, so just like Ron Paul managed to actually break through, they were able to shut him down. Trump is a billionaire. So Trump kind of riding that anti-establishment wave has really gone a long way. But here is the bottom line on Trump. As I said, Trump has enough character flaws, in my view, that he will be useful to the establishment big time, especially with regard to the authoritarian, anti-American, un-American principle policies. That's my view. So anybody who's I don't want to. There's things I could say here, like certain media personalities that are really supporting him, but I don't want to start a conflict, and I try not to. I try to understand that people have different perspectives, but the bottom line is I don't understand how anybody who supported Ron Paul could support Donald Trump. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. How can you support somebody who is an enthusiastic supporter of torture?
Yeah.
How can you support somebody who thinks it's okay to murder the family members of anybody that our corrupt government decides to label a terrorist? Which nobody has to be shown any evidence of any of this. It's just an accusation, and then there's that whole other, the NDAA part of this that's just a whole other element of this. I don't understand where they don't see the disconnect in that. The government is corrupt. That it's run by people who are sociopathic, immoral individuals who are only after power, who kill and murder and manipulate and do all these things. And yet you're going to support a guy who's in agreement with some of the very things that you are so passionately against. And how do you not see that disconnect? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know, but whatever. I guess it's just an issue of seeing how it plays out, and me personally continuing to do what I personally can do. That's all I can do. I focus on the things I can control, and I let the other stuff that I can't control go.
Well, there's this whole behind-the-scenes, whisper campaign going on where people like Roger Stone, who has access to these other radio hosts you're talking about, where they're going around saying, and it's organized, well, you know what, Trump just says all that crazy stuff just to rile up the crowds. Behind the scenes, he's a truther, and he believes in 9/11.
Well, yeah, I've heard Alex say that, and Alex would be an example of somebody who supports Trump, and I don't get it. If you would have told me, Alex, if you would have told me at the time that Alex was out there pushing for Ron Paul, that in the next election he would be supporting a guy who thinks Edward Snowden, somebody who exposed crime in the government at a level that nobody should be hung, that he would support somebody like that supports torture or supports killing the family members of anybody the government labels a terrorist, I would have thought you were crazy. I would have never got it. So I don't know what's going on there. That's what I'm saying. I respect a lot. I was on Alex's show for Dishonest Money, one of my other books back in 2012. That was right about the time of the second Ron Paul campaign. And, like I said, I respect a lot of the work he's done, but I just don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Did he ever have you back?
What's that?
Did he ever have you back?
No, I haven't been back on. I was on twice, and then I wouldn't be any use to him right now. If he had me on, I would not be supporting Trump. So it would have been nice if he had me on for Tragedy and Hope. He talks about the importance of Tragedy and Hope 101 because he talks about the importance of Quigley's work, or he certainly used to. But no, I haven't been on, and like I said, it might. At this point, I don't know that it would go well because I would be like,
right.
Alex, man, what is going on? I don't understand. How did you, a person who understands this concept of using fear to herd people right back into the arms of the beast itself, where they're using fear. So in this case, it's the fear of the Muslims, and it's the fear of this, and it's the fear of that, using that all to herd people right back into the arms of the very government that is corrupt and criminal. How is it that he's sitting down with Henry Kissinger? Of course he's going to be. I don't know, man.
Well, there's
we
also
can about that,
yeah, but there's also the factor that when you know people well who are in the Trump camp, you have that access. If Trump became president, now you have that personal access to the president. That's very good to have.
I understand that that is, unfortunately, that would be one of the things that I would have to say. I would say, look, have you considered the possibility that you're getting swept up into the same kind of stuff that all of the other media that you demonized for so long for ignoring real major problems? Now, in all fairness, I haven't listened enough. Maybe he's brought up those really big problems. But every time I've dropped by the site recently, it just seems to be a constant push. It's clear endorsement of somebody that I wouldn't have believed he could have endorsed based on those few things alone, not to mention some others. So, but whatever, like I said, it's not anything that there are things about that happen that I don't understand and I can't control. So I just I focus on my own thing and put my own opinion out there, and hopefully it has some influence on people who are on the fence or about something like that.
Now, once again, you're an atheist because you seem to have like this Zen kind of a way about you as well.
I'm not an atheist at all. I absolutely believe in a higher consciousness, I guess. I believe there is an ageless force that animates us, and it's it's more. I guess it would be more of a spiritual. I'm a spiritual person, and but I don't subscribe to any particular religion.
And how old are you?
I'm 46.
46. And what part of the country you live in?
I live in Ohio.
Ohio. Okay, very good. Okay, what about, we touched on it before, and Brexit.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? Good or bad?
Well, it could be. It hasn't happened yet. So we'll see what happens. They still got plenty of time. I personally, my comment on it was, I really don't see how the New World Order folks can spin this to their advantage. I really don't see it. But at the same time, I've read that it isn't binding. It isn't a binding vote. So if that information that I came across is accurate, that says a lot. And then knowing the history of these people, how they operate, they will put a tremendous amount of pressure, and they will start to create chaos to get the people and the politicians to reconsider this vote. And they might actually just put it up again for another vote and keep doing that. If it isn't binding, it isn't binding. That gives them plenty of time to create enough pressure to reverse this, especially with regard to economic chaos. Even people who are firmly in the camp of supporting it, you put enough pressure on a nation economically, it has a lot of power. I covered that in Dishonest Money. It's just a tactic. It's a tactic that these banking elite use. By applying pressure economically, somebody sees their, they see their pension fund drop to half value, and they're struggling to make ends meet and all this other stuff, and all of it's going to go away if you just go back and do this. Even, a lot of people could be swayed by that, especially a percentage when it's a close vote.
Kind of like what's going on in Venezuela right now,
I haven't studied Venezuela, but I know that there's a real mess going on there. And I know that a lot of people present it exclusively as a failure of socialism. I know you said you're a socialist. I don't believe in any type of – I mean, you said you were earlier you're an anarchist. I would be more in line with that. No rulers versus centralized top-down control. But I'm certain that there's pressures being applied there that people probably aren't being made aware of.
Okay, we're down to 7 minutes. Okay, time flies when you're talking to Joe Plummer. I really thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad it worked out this way, too, that we had the extra half hour.
Yeah, well, and we started a little bit early, so we're doing all right.
Right. Now, but I got to keep it tight, though, because I got to package it, for Friday night. This is definitely a Friday night show. Now, what do you want? How do you want to sum things up for us?
How do I want to sum things up? That's a good question. I guess the best way to sum things up would be to say the most important thing that I personally think people can do is to go out and become educated, because if you're unaware of the problem, you cannot solve it. So again, if we return to Quigley and we return to the basics of how this system was created intentionally to deceive people, and keep them running around like hamsters on one of them wheels, okay? So nothing ever happens and nothing ever, and I think everybody can pretty much agree with that. Nothing seems to change. We just continue going in the wrong direction, right? Well, the wrong direction is the right direction for the people who are in control of the meaningful policies. So if people can start to get their mind around the fact that this was intentionally set up to deceive, they will no longer be dupes. Even if they don't become politically active, at the very least, they will not be duped into supporting this fraudulent system that these unaccountable sociopathic criminals, if that sounds like hyperbole, just read the book and you'll decide for yourself whether or not I'm exaggerating with those labels there. To the extent they can understand that this system has been created by these types of people and is being run by these types of people, we can then begin the process. As more and more people become aware, we can begin the process of actually attacking the instruments that empower these people and affecting real change, hopefully without armed revolution, because that never really is any good if you can avoid it. But at the very least, even if it should come to armed revolution, the more people who understand the legitimacy of that rebellion, the safer we all are. So any way you slice it, I think the most important thing for people, which they think isn't important, but it is the most important thing, it's the thing on which all change is based, is education, is learning the truth so that you're actually operating from a sound foundation. And you can also speak with some facility to other people about what's actually going on and point them in the direction. If you read this book and you think it's important and it's really useful information, you can say, look, go check it out for yourself. Draw your own conclusions. Because I think it's written in a way, I'm not preaching. I'm not trying to hammer anything necessarily down anybody's throat. I'm just pointing to facts. So, and then people can determine how those facts fit into the reality that they were presented. That's the purpose of getting two sides of a story. This, again, is another tactic that they know and they use, that by withholding information, through withholding information, you can lie through omission. You can create an image in somebody's mind about something that is completely false simply by withholding pieces of data. And so by providing that other side of the information, people can see the reality.
Okay, now, Joel, let me ask you this. Now, let's say we would achieve 100% awareness. Everybody's aware of this. That even when they turn on the TV and the newscasters are talking, they can't even say this stuff with a straight face anymore, right? Mm-hmm. What is our next step? What would you suggest? Like a general strike? People just sit in the streets? What would the next, once people are 100% aware?
This is what I don't know if we're ever going to get 100% awareness.
Well, yeah, I know, yeah. I
don't think we need it because we never have. It's never been that way. It probably never will. God knows it wasn't a very large percentage of the people who a lot of people looked at the citizens of the colonies who rebelled against England as traitors. So, whatever. But really if you want to take it a step further, as awareness grows, this is what happens. Let's say you have 1 million people that are currently aware. Among that 1 million people, what you now have are 1 million people who can no longer be duped. But a very, very small percentage of those people are going to become very active. And those are the people who are going to start creating solutions. So if anybody feels there aren't enough solutions now, what's the answer? Go create more awareness. Because the more awareness we have, as just a statistical fact, there are going to be more, whatever that tiny, tiny percentage is of those people who become really, really active, that's where the solutions are going to come from. And that basic concept is we need to create competing parallel systems. So in my view, that's the way we're going to transition away from this. So competing parallel systems in money, competing parallel systems in media. Look at this. Look at what the competing parallel system in media has accomplished in just 13 years. It's a huge, huge deal. It really weakens the establishment, and it provides an outlet for all those other people who aren't dupes. The people who are waking up will move to those alternatives. So let's say, look at all the areas they've monopolized. They've monopolized money. That's a big one. So you have Bitcoin and these other things that are being created that could serve as an alternative and provide some stable solution that people can transition over to as we're trying to phase out this debt money system that they've created, which is I cover completely in another book. I already said, like manufacturing, 3D printing. We were talking about guns. I mean, look at the concept there. They try to outlaw guns. You said they're never going to get them all off the street. I pretty much agree with that. But even better, if people through 3D printing can create their own, whatever it is that they're trying to create. Okay, so we go media, we go money, we go manufacturing, medicine. I'm sure you know how they've monopolized all of that and how detrimental that's been. And we're making inroads there where things are finally this medical tyranny of opinion that existed. They finally had to acknowledge that dietary cholesterol doesn't have any meaningful effect on your cholesterol levels. I mean, that's been known for decades. But they've been able to terrify everybody all this time, and pretty soon, hopefully, this concept of taking statins being okay will fall too. You know, there's real money in all this stuff. So anyway, I don't want to go on too long. We've got education, we've got energy, we've got all of these places, agriculture, all these things that they've monopolized that act as levers of power that by creating competing parallel systems, we're going to be able to render that power. Hopefully, if not completely destroy it, we can weaken it until it's no longer relevant. That would be the ideal path to something better than what humankind has lived under forever, which are rulers.
Okay, can we do this? Can we take a commercial break and then we'll come back and finish up?
How much you need, man?
As much as I can get out of here. Now we're pushing it. I'd like to get how much more can you give me?
Well, if you want to do another, I'll do another 15 minutes.
So you got it. Okay,
right.
Let's play this ad. We'll be right back with more of Joe Plummer, Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom, and Democracy. Because I know right now the people listening to the show are saying, and I know if we end it short, they're going to be disappointed. They're going to complain to me. The last thing I need. Okay, we'll be right back after this with more of Joe Plummer.
Okay.
This is your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. And if you're enjoying this show right now, there's more. You can get more. You can go to the Ed Opperman YouTube channel, and you could subscribe there. And we have archives of all of our past shows for over the past 3 years, about 200, 300 shows. You can also go to the Opperman Report Spreaker channel, and you could follow us there. Again, a ton of shows, about 300 shows on there. And whenever we do an impromptu show, an emergency type broadcast that we do during the week occasionally, you'll get an email notifying you of breaking news and spontaneous broadcasts that we may do during the week. You can also go to oppermanreport.com and become a member. If you become a member, you help support the free archives on Spreaker and YouTube, and you help support the free shows on Friday evening and on Saturday evening. Each of these shows, Friday evening and Saturday evening, are carried for free on 7 internet stations, okay? So you help support that, but also, too, at OppermanReport.com in the members section, we have exclusive content. Shows that are recorded during the week that are only available to members. So please check out OppermanReport.com and help support the show.
The son of a Polish immigrant who grew up in a Brooklyn tenement, Bernie Sanders. He went to public schools, then college, where the work of his life began, fighting injustice and inequality, speaking truth to power. Bernie moved to Vermont, won election and praise as one of America's best mayors. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families and for principle, opposing the Iraq War, supporting veterans. Now he's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system that holds up a rigged economy. Bernie's campaign is funded by over 1 million small contributions from people like you. He's fighting for living wages, equal pay, and tuition-free public colleges. Bernie Sanders.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders, husband, father, grandfather, an honest leader, building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Check out strawmanmusic.com. Sean Duff is our webmaster here at the Opperman Report, and he's a very talented musician. He's part of a band called Strawman. They're based up there in Canada. Don't hold that against them. These are like-minded folks. If you like the shows you hear on the Opperman Report, you'll like the music that they have over at strawmanmusic.com.
Enough is enough. Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the 1930s. And then, after getting a huge taxpayer bailout because they were too big to fail, it turns out that 3 out of the 4 largest banks are bigger today than they were before we bailed them out. That's crazy. I'm Bernie Sanders. My plan: break up the big banks who are strangling our economy and make them pay their fair share of taxes. Then we can invest in the middle class, expand Social Security, and provide universal college education. I'll rein in Wall Street behavior so they can't crash our economy again. Will they like me? No. Will they begin to play by the rules if I'm president? You better believe it. I'm Bernie Sanders, Democratic candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
You know, you can get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, if you go to my website, emailrevealer.com. Now, this is a limited edition book, okay? And you can get a signed copy of this book, and it'll be personally autographed to you or whoever you want to give the book to as a gift. Once you have my signature on that book, you can copy the signature and put it on checks and pass them all over the world. Emailrevealer.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator.
He's fought injustice and inequality his whole life. Bernie Sanders. As a college student, he was arrested for challenging segregated housing. Bernie marched with Dr. King and thousands of others for civil rights. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families on health care and jobs. Now he's taking on Wall Street banks and a corrupt political system that keeps in place a rigged economy. Bernie Sanders, a reformer who believes in ending racial profiling and mass incarceration so the justice system works for everyone. Bernie Sanders.
There is no president who will fight harder to end institutional racism and reform our broken criminal justice system.
Bernie Sanders, an honest leader building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Okay, welcome back. We are back with Joe Plummer at joeplummer.com, Plummer, and you can also find him at tragedyandhope.info. Joe, quick question for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the theory is, okay, we're all waking up and we're becoming aware, and now we're all grumbling about this, and we're looking to investigate and research and see who's behind this, and everyone's talking about the New World Order, and the little kids in school, and Justin Bieber fans, and talking about the Illuminati and stuff.
Good.
Okay. But
I mean, at least they're talking about something other than the other. I mean, I wouldn't expect that from Bieber fans. So you might have. I don't know if that was supposed to be pessimistic, but damn, I'm kind of impressed that they got some Bieber fans talking about that stuff.
Not just Bieber, One Direction fans, all those Taylor Swift fans. They ask the Kardashian.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, my daughter's 15 years old. She's tuned into all this stuff. She's a revolutionary.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, and she's been for a long time. Now, but in some ways, and it kind of concerned me bringing up my kid, because do I want them to think it's hopeless and then that we can't resist this and we can't stop fighting, which is, I think, it's in every bone of my body, man. I got to keep fighting, okay? I can't stop. But now, okay, so now, everyone, they got us right now in such misery and such slavery. Everybody's talking about, you go on talk radio, everyone's talking about this stuff constantly, right? Now, and we're all grumbling and complaining. We're looking for solutions, how to fight them back. Why wouldn't they? What is the motivation for that? For them having us being so greedy to keep us in this position? Because if they would just make things a little more comfortable for us at such a little expense, just double the tax on the top 1%, the rest of us could be living such better lives. Lower the price of gasoline, we could be such easier lives. So, like with the flip of a switch in one day, they could do this. Now, and then we would be complacent. We would be a wealthy country of happy people. Of course, the rest of the world, we'd still be enslaving them. But here, the people with the money and the knowledge, we would be more happy with what's going on. Why don't they do that?
Well, I don't know that I agree with the premise, because there's other things that people are unhappy about. They're unhappy about our foreign policy. Truly moral people are outraged at our foreign policy. They're unhappy about the erosion of the constitutional limitations on government. These are things that they can't give up on. This is what they want. And as far as, the taxation issue on the upper 1% and all that, they could take all the money that the upper 1% has. It wouldn't matter. It's nothing. They spend trillions and trillions of dollars every single year. So you could take all of the top billionaires' money, and $1 billion is nothing. $1 billion is one out of, it's $1 out of 1,000. $1 billion is $1 out of 1,000 with regard to $1 trillion, because $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. So the money thing, I get that, you come from a perspective where the concept is this, it's the 1%, but it really isn't so much that 1% that they point to. It's the 1/1000th of 1% that are actually controlling this system, that created the income tax, that created the Federal Reserve. They did all this stuff to confiscate wealth and use that money for this sovereignty destruction project, which is clearly what my book is about. I get into all of that stuff. So, there are some minor adjustments that they could make, but on the real issues that matter to them, which is to be rulers. So if you were into anarchy, anarchy means no rulers, right? Isn't that pretty much what it translates to? So, instead of monarchy, it's anarchy, That isn't what they're after. They're after oligarchy. They're after absolute control. So that means they get to force compliance, really. It's a system of top-down control where they have the ability to compel obedience around the entire globe. And so anybody who's really disturbed about those types of things, which obviously includes the erosion of civil liberties and the violation of privacy and the exploitation of people around the world and murder and all this horrible stuff that they do, they can't stop doing that. That's their thing. That's what they do. But look, I'm not trying to depress people either. See, this is the thing.
Yeah, I know.
Look, we're all going to be dead soon, all right? That's the bottom line. Every one of us are going to be dead before we know it. So that's the way life works. You're born into this world, and we talked a little bit, you're religious. I'm not religious, but I believe in this ageless force that animates us. It gives us this thing called a conscience that if we are just truthful and honest and will listen, I think can direct us properly. And so whether I die today or I die 40 years from now, it's going to be over in a flash. And that's the same for everybody. So I think that if we can maybe go inward a little bit more and stop and look kind of, Marcus Aurelius. I don't know if you've ever read Meditations, but, it's so interesting to hear an old emperor from so long ago talking about the same problems that we face today and struggling with how to deal with them. And one of the things that he went over was this concept of just keeping the importance of our work in perspective. Like that, in the grand scheme of things, we're insignificant. We're not going to be here very long, but at the same time, we can focus on what we can do, and that's all it's really about. So, the concept of becoming impatient or worried or whatever all this other stuff is, if you just take an immediate view of everything, I can understand that. But if you take a long-term view, like, okay, I'm doing what I can right now to make the world a better place, and if you can be satisfied with that, because being dissatisfied with what you can't control is useless. Finding a place where you can contribute what you can and being satisfied with it is everything, and becoming comfortable there. Because the only other alternative is to just accept things as they are. And no change ever comes about that way. And all change has come about through the former, through people being comfortable with with doing, whether maybe they're not totally happy with it, but with doing what they have the power to do right now and living their lives according to that inner guidance that they have, until they get promoted, until whatever exists on the other side of all this. I don't know if that helps or not. I'm trying to it's hard for me to boil down my perspective, really. I used to get really, really angry and really, really frustrated, and I realized I was only poisoning myself. So maybe that's the best advice I can give to people, that pay attention to how you feel. And if you're feeling angry, too angry, because anger isn't necessary. Some people think it is. I become angry and then I do something. Okay, but it's the do something that matters. Ideally, you can get into a pattern where you do something without the anger. You can know what is, you can know that it's wrong, you can know that you need to do something about it, and you can just do it and try not to allow it to poison you. Don't poison yourself with the pessimism or the anger or the hostility. Of course, it's absolutely, totally disgusting. I almost swore. Of course it is. But it doesn't help any. It doesn't help any to go there. All that matters is that you're doing what you can without poisoning yourself. If these scumbags can enjoy themselves raping and pillaging and murdering and stealing and lying and deceiving, then maybe we should work to try to enjoy ourselves, living, being true to ourselves in this world with what we have the ability to do. Because they don't have everything they want. And yet they're still enjoying their position. Well, we don't have everything we want, but we should be able to enjoy what we're able to do, I think, and try not to harm ourselves, poison ourselves with too much ugliness and pessimism.
Hey, you make a very good point. I think you're making a better point than you realize you're making. But also, too, is that, when you look more further in, we have our family, we have love, we have, you fall in love, all this kind of stuff, which should be the main focus of our life. Because when you're on your deathbed, these are the things that will be most important. You're not changing the world and stuff like that. Joe, let me ask you this before we go, because do you have any upcoming appearances you want to promote?
I'm not doing it right now because I'm at some point I'm going to start doing speaking, but I'm just not right now. Right now I'm working on translating my book into different languages. I'm currently working on a Spanish version. That too will be available for free. There's already a German version that's coming out probably in a few months here, and then I'm probably going to French after that. So it's keeping me busy, basically. But at some point I do need to go out and do public speaking because I think it has a different impact when you can talk directly to people. So, but no, not right now. nothing to promote with regard to that.
Okay, no other interviews, radio shows, or anything coming up?
No, not right now. Okay. No, I take them as they come.
So they're gonna drive you crazy. And right after everybody comes on my show, man, everybody forget it. Tonight when the show's Friday night when the show, you're gonna be getting emails. People trying to book you. Okay. Joe Plummer, man, thank you so much, and thank you so much for giving me the extra time. Okay, my friend?
It was good to be with you, Ed, and hopefully I hope your audience finds the information we discussed and the information in the book useful.
I know they will, man. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there we had Joe Plummer. Okay, that was a good show. Joe Plummer, Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Justice, Freedom and Democracy. Don't forget the websites is Joe Plummer, PLUMMER.com, tragedyandhope.info. There's something burning on me right now. I just got to say, not that I want to say I disagree with Joe Plummer, and now I want to just do a whole other show. Man, I got to tell you something, guys. When he's talking about how we have to just realize what we could do and not get angry and not get frustrated. You guys know, people who listen to this show all the time know about my whole story with the Sarah Palin presidency and my involvement in that and my input and effect on that. Okay, for a long story short, we were investigating infidelity in Sarah Palin's family, and the day we sent some evidence came to my office is the day she announced she wasn't going to run for president in 2008. So I believe that one person can make a huge difference. Okay, I also believe too. I'm going to go into this whole story in the future, guys, about the whole thing with the Bernie Sanders campaign. They were convinced they were going to win Nevada. They were going to come on this show, okay, and because they were so convinced they were going to win Nevada. They were worried that the show might harm their chances. So and I've been dealing with the highest level, and I believe too that Hillary people infiltrated that campaign here locally and nationwide. But we're going to get into all that in the future. When the election's over and dust is settled down, I'm going to tell you a long story, okay? But there's one other thing I want to get out there, okay? And where I'm begging for your help, okay? Is that I know with every bone in my body, Okay, I am more convinced right now than I have ever been in my life because of something that just happened in the last 24 hours that I can't tell you yet. Okay? I know that had, like the stuff with the Sally Miller show, okay, if I had if I had a little team working with me, man, to put out press releases on that and to get that show and these other shows we've done trying to influence things, get them more attention than they're getting, okay, I know we could have had an effect on this election. I know you think I'm sounding crazy and there's delusions of grandeur, but you're going to find out in the future what I'm talking about. You'll find out, okay? And I also believe, too, that if I could have gotten this show on AM and FM radio in California before the California primary, that we could have made a big impact in that too. And all this can be done, guys. But I'm at my wit's end and the end of my rope of all the work that I can do at all of this. And I need help. Okay, I need some volunteers coming in. Now, and I'm telling you guys that I know this because right now, I'm not going to talk about this, so don't ask me. Don't ask me in the chat room. Don't ask me anything. I am right on the verge of working on something freaking huge. The biggest thing I've ever worked on in my life. Okay? Something that's going to make history. Okay? And I'm not talking out of my butt here, guys. And I know that we can be getting a lot more done here. You know, I'm doing all that I can. We had volunteers, again, funds, you know, member section, donations. I hate to keep saying that. Sponsors, find me advertise on a freaking show. You know how many emails I get a day? This show's reaching freaking a ton of people. That weekend when we were in California and I missed doing the show, I must have got like 250 emails and messages just overnight. Where's the show, Ed? Where's blah, 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 blah. We can't hear the show. You know, it's insane. And then the freaking the numbers went through the roof. Everybody looking for the show, clicking on every freaking button they could find. Okay. But don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed Joe Plummer, and I think he's onto a lot of good stuff. But I just know that one man could be making a difference here. And I know that I'm that one man at this moment. Okay, I know that a lot could be done here more than we're getting done. And it's so frustrating in so many ways. But again, too, you know, I love my family, you know, so blah, blah, blah. Okay, speaking of getting things done on a small scale in a very effective way, Adventures in Life Ministry. Now, you might remember my friend Dave Walters from my church, and by some bleeping crazy coincidence, I was over at my pastor's house having coffee on Christmas week and talking to Dave, and he says, you know, I got this family I want you to talk to. They're up there in Oregon, and they're having to go to prison. The father and the son's going to prison because, you know, they did this controlled burn, and then they got charged as terrorists, you know. And that was the Hammond family that sparked off that whole crazy thing with the Bundys and Hammonds, you know, all their, you know, Armand Bundy, you know, was nuts, you know, doing a standoff. By the way, the Hammond family totally disavows himself from the nuts and the armed standoff guys. But my friend Dave, the reason why he knows the Hammond family is because a member of the Hammond family is involved in his ministry, which is called Adventures in Life Ministry. Now, Dave's been on the show a couple of times talking about different things. Now, Dave is going down to Mexico, Oaxaca, Mexico, where right now, by the way, where the teachers union are down there having an armed standoff, talking about the Second Amendment, and, you know, they're down there toting guns. Women are down there. There's videos on YouTube you can look up where these women are holding up their shotguns and holding up their rifles in defiance of government oppression. And Dave's going down there not to arm these women or take their guns away or anything with guns down there in Oaxaca. He's going down there as a Christian to provide water filters for the people of Oaxaca. Okay? It's ailministry.org. One of these water filters, guys, it costs like $100. And they can take water from the river and put it in a bucket and pump it out using this little thing here and have clean, potable drinking water right there instantly. Okay? One of these water filters for $100 can supply a family with water for 10, 15 years. Okay? This is life-changing work that can be done down there in Oaxaca. Okay? Adventures in Life Ministry. Dave is heading down there this week, and they need immediately support. Okay? So just think, man, you know, you're going to bed tonight, it's getting late, maybe had a couple of drinks. You want to do something good for the world, send $10 to Dave a guy who's sacrificing a lot to go back and forth down here toward an armed. Right now, there's armed resistance going on down here. But he's one of the good guys. No one's going to mess with him. Okay, that is adventuresinlifeministry.org. AILministry.org. Dave Walters, cool guy. Help him supply these water filters down there in Mexico. I'm going to be making a commercial too. I want to support that ministry with this show from now on. Okay? So on a grand scale, okay, you support the show, trust me, there's stuff we could be doing to make big changes. Okay? Trust me on that. I wouldn't lie to you. Okay? And you're going to find out, you're going to hear me because a book's going to come out. Whole stuff's coming out soon. If all this goes through. Just in the past 24 hours. Don't ask me what it is. On a smaller scale, okay, GoFundMe, Faith Stockwell, STOCKWELL. And if you go to GoFundMe and you do a search on Faith Stockwell, she doesn't really know how to work GoFundMe. I just told her how to do it. She's trying to raise about $1,400. She's raised $40 so far. Okay, I'm going to hope and pray she doesn't hear this, because she definitely doesn't want you to know this. Or use this information to feel sorry for her and support her. I believe it was either 8 or 9 years ago, almost to the day. That's just about the same time I had just first met Faith on MySpace. Okay? And we were just little MySpace buddies being goofy on the internet. And one day Faith disappears, and no one knows what happened to her. And it turns out that her little boy, 8 or 9 years old, had gotten a hold of a bottle of pills. He was visiting somebody, and he ate the pills one by one, and he overdosed on these pills. She lost her son, her little, you know, and she's such a loving person to begin with, but every parent loves their child. Imagine if I lost Victoria, So it was either 8 or 9 years ago to the day she lost her son to an accidental overdose. Wasn't her fault. The kid wasn't under her care at that immediate time. It was under someone else's immediate care, like a family member was babysitting. And I could imagine what would happen. My life would be over. If 8 years ago that happened to my daughter, I'd be dead right now. I'd be dead, I'd be done. Just what I went through in my situation with the custody stuff, was the fight of my life. Faith Stockwell, GoFundMe.com. It changed your life forever, in so many ways you can't imagine. But here it is, 8-9 years later. Now she has I believe like a 3-year-old little girl named Silver. They call her Silly. And Faith and her little daughter, they got involved in a bad situation with domestic violence, bad decisions, right? And so they had to leave that. And now they have an opportunity to get into an apartment, which would be like Section 8 subsidized, so once she's in there, everything's cool, she got it all worked out. But just to get in there, okay, she needs like $1,400. So she did this GoFundMe. We just did it the other day. I knew it was the anniversary of this tragedy, and I knew she'd be sad. I just contacted her, and I said, hey, what's going on? I told her, I can get this apartment if I get this money. I said, let's do a GoFundMe. I'll promote it on the show. And we did it in 5 minutes. And right away, she got $40 in the first 5 minutes, She's all excited. So I'm just asking you guys, just to look into your own hearts tonight and think about how you can change one person's life, okay, who's had a hard time, $5-10, and I know I ask everybody for money all the time, but I don't want to, and one way you could support the show, is, with the YouTube, if you share the YouTube videos, I get a little bit of cash from that. I'm really trying to work on the YouTube videos to bring up money with that. Of course, you subscribe, become a member, $6 a month. It's like a cup of coffee you drink at Starbucks. I know there's a lot of people listening to this show that got money. I know it. I know what's going on. Now, also too, Amazon, if you're going to buy something on Amazon, if you go to one of my ads, one of my Amazon links, and click on that first before you make your regular purchase on Amazon, I'll get a commission on it. I get up to 6% we can get. So especially Christmas time, you're doing your shopping and stuff like that. Email revealer if you need a locate or something like that. If you think your husband's cheating, you get hold of me there. All these things you can do to help this effort and help support this show, because I hope you can see how hard I'm working for you, and if you only knew, and I might be able to tell you what I'm working on next, and when I tell you, you're going to flip, okay, cause it's going to come out sooner or later, because you know me, I can't keep a secret, but what we have on the verge of here in the works is huge, and it's going to make history. It's going to make the history books, okay? Maybe not my personal name involvement in it, although that's possible too. Anyway, we're out of time. Gotta go. And it is going to be right now, 8 p.m., 7 p.m., reboot, okay? And then we'll do the after show.